Welcome to the Humorism Evening Podcast, the official podcast of the Humorism newsletter. I'm your host, Seth Simons, author of the Humorism newsletter. I'm recording this early in the evening of Tuesday, July 7th, and you will receive it sometime in the morning of Thursday, July 9th. This is episode 7. We made it all the way to episode 7. Thank you for listening. Before we get into today's episode, I want to point you to my appearance this week on the podcast Virtue Signal, hosted by Humorism friends Eleanor Russell, Taylor Meanswell, and Andre Callow. We talked about the new Louis C.K. special, how awful so much stand-up comedians are, and whether there's any hope for the art form in the industry. Spoiler alert, I think there's a little bit of hope. Not a lot, but a little bit of hope. It was a fun talk, an interesting talk. I am glad they had me on. I'm excited to join them again in the future. I hope. I'll put a link in the description and the email. I've got some big news to start off today's episode, some big personal news. You're not going to believe this. Maybe you will believe it. I don't know what you'll believe. A few days ago, I learned that I am Canadian. Apparently, there's some new law in Canada that grants citizenship by descent. And apparently, my great-grandfather John, also known as Hans, was born in Ontario before he eventually moved to the US. Yada, yada. I was born, and now it turns out I'm Canadian. In a way, I feel as if I always knew I would end up being Canadian. When I was a child, I don't think I've ever talked about this, but when I was a child, some of my earliest comedy loves were SCTV, the sketch show made by a bunch of Canadians, and Strange Brew, the movie based on a sketch in the sketch show by a bunch of Canadians. And now I know that the reason I loved them was because they were a part of my complex heritage. Pretty cool stuff. What else? It has been a week now since the new Louis C.K. special was released. And I will admit I have been a little surprised that he didn't do any press about it. He went on Rick Rubin's podcast last week, and he went on Dan Soder's podcast this week. And so far, as best I can tell, that's it. He didn't do any newspaper or magazine interviews. He didn't go on any of his huge podcaster friends' shows, Rogan or Theo Vaughn or Tim Dillon, his friend Tim Dillon, whom he was on a private airplane with last year when they both learned that Charlie Kirk was shot. Tim has mentioned this a few times, how they were on a PJ together when Charlie got kirked. He did do some light press when his novel came out last year. Louis did. He went on the podcast circuit. He did an interview, a pretty friendly interview with the Wall Street Journal. I guess this time around, either he wanted to let the work speak for itself, or maybe just nobody in the media reached out to him at all, which is not something that I think happened. But just because he didn't do any interviews about it, of course, doesn't mean there was no discussion about it in the media. I discussed some of that last week, as you remember. And I do want to talk briefly right now about a segment in Vulture's Good One podcast. Their most recent episode was about the special, basically arguing that it was pretty bad, except for a few good bits. And then they talked a bit about media coverage of Louis C.K. I'm doing a lot of Matryoshka doll media coverage stuff, snake eating its own tail. The media loves to talk about the media, and I'm part of the media, so I'm going to do that. Anyways, here is Vulture's Jesse David Fox chatting with Vulture's TV and comedy critic Catherine Van Arendonk. Here I will roll the clip. Roll clip.
What is sort of interesting about the Louis C.K. narrative is, I do think, to the world of podcasts in which he stayed on, a lot of the reason of what happened to him was that performance that was leaked in Long Island where he makes the school shooting jokes. Yeah. That became the I remember he would do interviews it's when that happened to him, I was like, how dare they do it? That was the worst thing that's ever happened. That happened. Yeah, and people say bad things, and now we're fine with people saying bad things. Actually, the sort of Me Too aspect of it is fully in the rear view. And I do think other than the Theo Vaughn mention, he'll probably be done talking about it forever, unless I'm sure there are journalists at comparable publications to our own, and maybe even our own, I don't know, probably not, who are kind of be an interesting time to finally interview Louis C.K. about this stuff. Yeah. And I bet part of it will be rooted in he's good at stand-up. There's only so many people are good at stand-up. There is this sort of full cynicism of the modern times, where modern times or modernity, where it's if this is the compromise of what capitalism broadly, where you're like, well, if everything's going to be awful, at least I should get cheap gas prices and cheap groceries. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what this feels like. This feels like, well, like people are going to be exploited no matter what. So like shrimp should be cheap. That's what this feels like.
You just also cannot remove the larger context of where we are as a country. Culturally.
You can't.
I can't.
And I can. But people don't even think about.
No, but from the sort of like press perspective of why those things would happen. It's like, well, of course, how am I going to draw a line for Louis C.K. when our president is this person or whatever? Like we are in this world of, you know, all of the Overton windows, all of the people who love to talk about Overton windows have all gone together into a room and announced that, like, this is where we are now. So, of course, it would be wild to not, because we're also doing profiles of Nazi, you know, just all of it's kind of together in a big, terrifying, like, rain stick of noise. And so I think that is also what I feel about this special coming out at this particular moment. Although it is interesting that it is doing so, you know, in this part of the Trump phase where it also feels like maybe people are thinking, I don't know.
Okay, that was Vulture's Jesse David Fox chatting with Vulture's Catherine Van Arendonk. I wanted to share that because I do think it is reflective of a fairly common sentiment about Louis and about all these right-wing podcasters who have effectively become mainstream pundits. And if it's not a common sentiment, broadly speaking, it is at least a sentiment that I commonly encounter, which is that Donald Trump is president, so how could we possibly draw the line at all of these awful, awful guys who, though awful, are not nearly so awful as Donald Trump, who again is president? And my feeling about that is I personally think we should expect each other to draw the line at Donald Trump. I think it's bad that he's president. He shouldn't be president. We should be doing everything we can to stop him and to remove him from the presidency and from power and to marginalize his supporters. For those of us in the media, I think that means not seeking the favor or access of Donald Trump and his allies and his associates. Looking back at the last decade of American life under Donald Trump, I think it is pretty safe to say that the most impactful and important reporting on the Trump administration has not depended on access to him or on friendly interviews with him. I think the most important and impactful reporting has been deeply critical, investigative reporting that doesn't really rely on him at all. It is my belief, my crazy belief, that you don't need access to do interesting or useful journalism, especially when it comes to people who aren't honest narrators of their own lives and affairs. I think this applies to politics and business as much as it applies to pop culture, which is both a business and highly political. It's interesting to me that Jesse David Fox in that clip said that the Me Too aspect of the Louis C.K. story is in the rear view, which I think is sort of a glaring is-ought situation. Yes, it has been 10 years, almost 10 years, since the Times story came out. That's all in the past. On the other hand, holy shit, it has been 10 years since the Times story came out, and Louis C.K. has yet to apologize or honestly account for his actions. At the same time, in all of those 10 years, no news organization has looked any deeper into the story. Isn't that crazy? I think that's crazy. The guy muscled right through it, just like so many other creeps and racists in comedy muscled right through it, and the response by so many in the media was that this means they deserved to muscle through it, that their wrongdoing must not matter to people, or else, you know, they wouldn't have come back. They wouldn't have all these audiences welcoming them back. That's one way to look at it. Another way of looking at it could be that this is a huge communication failure, that the media did not effectively communicate the reality and severity of Louis C.K.'s crimes, and that as a result of this failure, he was able to return to the mainstream. I think public opinion is dynamic. It can change. It can be changed. It may be true that many public figures no longer depend on the press to reach their audiences because they can go on their friends' podcasts or their own podcasts or use social media or YouTube or what have you. But I think this is as much a blessing as it is a curse. It leaves a very obvious way for journalists and critics to distinguish themselves from influencers and publicists, which is to do what influencers and publicists don't do, which is to be unsparing and unrelenting in their treatment of people like Louis C.K., who refuse to tell the truth, who refuse to tell their own stories honestly. With all of that said, let us now turn to our friend Whitney Cummings. She performed at the Kennedy Center a few weeks ago as part of the Mark Twain Award ceremony honoring Bill Maher. And then last week she went on her podcast to recap the affair. She said she didn't know until the event that Trump had installed himself as the board chairman of the Kennedy Center. She had no idea that he was in control of the place. And she said that while she respects artists who refuse to perform there out of protest, she's a little bit of a punk, which is why she didn't refuse. She also said that Kennedy Center staffers told her they'd get fired if she told certain jokes in her set, so she had to cut at least one of them, which she then did us the service of telling on her podcast.
I also didn't realize he's like terrorizing the people that work there. Like I was practicing my jokes and people were like, yeah, we'll get fired if you say that. And I'm like, that is the worst thing you could hear before as a comic, like it was kind of roasty, you know?
They added to the job description, they have to police the jokes in the building.
Don't know, like what a dork. I'm like, if he even watches this, he is such a dork. But I did cut a joke and I feel the need to just say it. And I'm sure it's going to get us demonetized on YouTube, possibly kicked off. I may actually need to, Truth Social might be the only platform we have left to do this show on after I tell it to you. But for Trump to try to put his name on the Kennedy Center, well, he succeeded. For Trump to put his name on the Kennedy Center, this is petty even for him. But Trump has always hated John F. Kennedy because the Kennedys had Marilyn Monroe where he had a chance to grab her by the... Pretty sure all those words are bleeped if you're watching this on YouTube.
That was Whitney Cummings on her podcast, Good For You. And I know what you're thinking. You are thinking, that's funny. That's pretty funny. She doesn't actually believe the Kennedys killed Marilyn Monroe. It's just a joke. She's just doing some hyperbole for laughs. Ha. There's no way she actually thinks that. That's definitely not a thing she actually thinks, which is what's so funny about it. Well, let's continue rolling clip.
It was funny because I was like, this is actually worse on the Kennedys. This joke. Like, you could argue having a woman is worse than being caught on a hot mic saying, you know, grab her. It's just, my thing was like, they're all monsters. Both sides are monsters, which is why, and then I found myself trying to trade in jokes because I had a joke like, it's like Trump didn't make it tonight. He got caught in sex traffic. And if, I shouldn't tell the jokes. Okay. It's in the special, but I found myself being like, well, what if I cut that one and then do, because you don't think, wouldn't Trump see that and go like, yeah, the Kennedys did kill her. He wouldn't. I feel like he'd like that one.
I'll give you 2 essays for a pee grab.
Like you're there going like, gotta do this joke. I don't want to do this joke, but did he really kill? Was it the CIA that killed her? And I'm like, why is this even a conversation? First of all, why am I the bad guy for saying what these people did? And second, why are we all afraid to say it? And I guess that's what the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor is. It's using humor to, you know, call out political leaders. But just to be like, oh, yeah, okay, I wouldn't want to hurt the Kennedys' feelings, you know. God forbid one of the people that helped arrange Marilyn Monroe's puke perfectly so that it looked like an overdose. I wouldn't want them to be offended.
That again was Whitney Cummings on the podcast Good For You with Whitney Cummings. Why are we all afraid to say it, do you think? Why are we all so afraid to say that the Kennedy family assassinated Marilyn Monroe? Gosh, I don't know. I guess we just don't want to get punished for speaking too much truth to power. And speaking of getting punished for speaking too much truth to power, here are our friends Matt McCusker and Shane Gillis mocking a man named David Striever, a New York resident who in January sent an email to ICE acting director Todd Lyons calling him, quote, a monstrous human being, end quote, who, quote, will go down in history as America's Reinhard Heydrich, the butcher, end quote. This was in the wake of the murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis. And in response to his email, ICE sent officers to his home to deliver a warning that his email was considered a threat. Here is what our friends Matt McCusker and Shane Gillis had to say about that. Roll clip.
The email, they had snippets of the email. It was so embarrassing, dude. Was there a guy in like the Nazi times called the Butcher or something? He's like, you will go down in history as the Butcher, similar. And it's like, okay, man, that's such a crazy parallel. It's like, not really, dude. He definitely won't.
Yeah.
We're not even talking about it anymore.
I don't know. He's not going to be the head of the SS in fucking Auschwitz.
It's almost, dude, I hate to say this. It's almost like they want it. I think they crave real fascism. If you think about it, they're constantly summoning that. And it's like, yo, chill.
Yeah,
We've made some progress. You have to admit, I don't think we're going to do that anymore. Stop trying to make everything out to be like, you're going to go down as that guy. No, he's not. It was a 2-week news cycle. We all forgot about it. Stop doing it. They're really rubbing the lamp on that. You're like, dude, stop.
They are.
Chill with that, dude. You don't have to do that.
They want to be fucking freedom fighters.
I know.
That's all they want, dude. They got the Bathhouse Initiative. That's how they fight back against the Nazis. All the Nazis, they said, we're going to fucking jack off together.
You just go to confess to your wife. You're like, forgive me, headmistress, but I've just got jerked off at the bathhouse.
Oh, that's totally cool.
I was sending off emails to ICE and I got really fired up and I needed an outlet for my righteous energy.
Were any of them Somali? Oh, too bad. Next time that would be cool. Oh, they don't like that? They don't like the thing that you love? Oh.
It's so fucking lame.
It is very lame.
Oh, fuck.
That was Matt McCusker and Shane Gillis making fun of David Striever, who was targeted by the federal government for calling ICE acting director Todd Lyons a Nazi after the murder of Renee Good. So much for our free speech champions, huh? I mean, we've got Whitney. On one hand, we've got Whitney, who thinks free speech means spreading insane conspiracy theories. And then on the other hand, we've got Matt and Shane, who think that free speech means demeaning people who actually risk their safety to criticize the state. I think that's just awesome. And speaking of the state, last week, Theo Vaughn had Louisiana Senator John Kennedy on his podcast. I think the GOP must have seen Theo getting a little too anti-Israel, so they sent one of their most racist soldiers to go tell him that Israel isn't committing a genocide. Hamas and Iran are the real bad guys, and by the way, so are democratic socialists. Here's my favorite segment in the episode, which comes when Kennedy is rambling about how leftists think America is evil and racist. Roll clip.
America's not perfect, but we're good. And we caught the disease of slavery, but we beat it back.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation about how slavery started and where it started and what exactly happened. And I do think that over time, there's definitely this constant, there's definitely a ploy, it seems like by the media sometimes, that tries to tries to keep people locked into like a victim mentality sometimes.
That's true.
And it's okay to be a victim sometimes, but if all you are is a victim, I think it's tough to move forward sometimes.
It is.
For any of us, regarding anything. What do you think are some of the pitfalls of long terms of like socialism that maybe people don't see that have happened in the past? If you have an example.
I do not believe that the people in the Democratic Socialist Party that I just named, some of them I know, Senator Sanders is a friend of mine. I believe deep down they think they're smarter and more virtuous than the American people, and that they can make decisions for the country and the country will be better off. And I respectfully disagree with them.
Yeah.
I trust the American people. This is the greatest country in all of human history. The whole world knows it. Everybody wants to come here. When's the last time you heard of somebody trying to sneak into China? People want to come here.
That's a good point.
And it's because we believe in free enterprise. We believe that our future can be better than our present or our past. We believe in free will and responsibility. You know, most Americans, they don't read Aristotle every day because they're busy earning a living. But they're plenty smart.
Yeah.
They don't need a soul-crushing federal government to run their lives. And Free enterprise works. Socialism, name one country where it worked. It doesn't work in Cuba. Yeah. It didn't work in Argentina. It didn't work in the former Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's what I think sometimes if we do get to that place of it, where if it were to grow that much, that could it work? Is it different? Would something be different this time? I don't know.
That's Theo Vaughn talking to Louisiana Senator John Kennedy. I'm going to play the very beginning of that one more time.
America's not perfect, but we're good. And we caught the disease of slavery, but we beat it back.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation about how slavery started and where it started and what exactly happened. And I do think that over time, there's definitely this constant, there's definitely a ploy, it seems like by the media sometimes, that tries to tries to keep people locked into like a victim mentality sometimes.
That was Theo Vaughn saying that there's a lot of speculation about how slavery started and where it started and what exactly happened. Didn't you know? It's hard to say who was responsible exactly for slavery. And by the way, if you still have a victim mentality because of slavery, that makes it tough for society to move forward, and it's the media's fault. Gosh, I just wonder who he could be talking about here. I wonder if he could possibly be saying that Black people are wrong to criticize racism. I don't know. I don't know if he's wrong to say that racism is still a meaningful social force. I don't know if that's what he's saying. That would mean that he's racist, if that was what he was saying. And I just can't believe that Theo Vaughn, who could be racist. I just can't believe that about a guy who tweeted the other day that, quote, "lot of mixed dudes in the World Cup, eh?" End quote. And I just can't believe that about a guy who a few days ago posted a story on his Instagram, who posted a picture of himself next to an Asian baby in a stroller and tagged his friend, the comedian Bobby Lee, and wrote, quote, "met your friend." Could that guy possibly be racist? No way. I think he's just pretending to be racist. He's just making fun of the actual racists by pretending to be racist himself to show how bad it is to be racist. It's really funny if you think about it. And speaking of racists, here's our friend Dave Smith in his episode last week, complaining about the Supreme Court decision upholding birthright citizenship, which he described as devastating.
I remember trying to explain on S.E. Cup show to S.E. Cup and Andy Levy. And I remember thinking that I was making a lot of sense. And then looking up at their faces, and both of them were just like horrified with me, where I was just like, I was basically trying to say, and I was not as much of an immigration restrictionist then as I am now, but I was just kind of trying to make the argument to them that, like, if somebody opposing America not being a majority white country doesn't make them a Nazi. Like, there's a difference between that. You know, like I was just like, there's a difference between just being like, hey, America was always a majority white country, I kind of like it staying that way, and being like, I want to exterminate this group of people. Like, there's a big gap there. No, and like, they're both like, what do you even mean? Like, it just seemed like they, and I like both of them, personally, but they both just, I don't know. It wasn't resonating with them. But I mean, again, I think that we're very trapped still today. It's getting better, but we're very trapped about this conversation, about even having honest conversations when it comes to race. It's such a sensitive issue.
That was Dave Smith, Nazi. I've said before that he's a Nazi, and I will say again right now that he's a Nazi because I believe he is a Nazi. And I think it's bad to be a Nazi, especially one whose profile keeps rising in recent years, as Dave's has. And also because I think he is positioning himself to run for office in 2028. As you may recall, he came close to running for the Libertarian nomination in 2024. And more recently, he has made himself a sort of unofficial surrogate for GOP Representative Thomas Massie, and also a huge Tucker Carlson booster. And in addition to all of that, he left his longtime podcast, The Legion of Skanks, which seems like the sort of thing you would do if you were trying to set yourself up for an earnest go at politics. I think if either Massie or Carlson run in 2028, I think it is there's a good chance that we will see Dave in contention for the ticket as well, which is bad because he's a Nazi. And this is not the first time, by the way, that he has said he wants America to stay majority white. He said it a bunch on his podcast, and he also said it on Theo Vaughn's podcast earlier this year, and Theo agreed with him. Were he to run for office, I think he would be very dangerous in that he is friends with many comedians, many stupid comedians, who would love to see one of their own on the ticket, and who, I cannot stress enough, are incredibly gullible, dumb people who are very eager to agree with and spread white nationalism. What's special about this particular instance of Dave making this argument, however, is when he goes on to explain that racial diversity is like the John Lennon song Imagine. It sounds good, but if you listen closely, you'll realize it's actually really bad.
Imagine all the people living life in peace. All right, that part sounds nice. Doesn't seem like human nature so much, but it does sound nice. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Here's the next line. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. So anyway, my point is just that it's like, look, sometimes these things kind of sound nice, but like, what would actually happen in the world if you tore down all of the structures, all of everything, and then said, now let's just hope everyone gets along? You're like, oh, okay, but what you're describing here is that, what do you mean no possessions? Well, people need possessions. What do you mean no hunger? People get hungry. You know what they do? If they have no possessions and no food, they fucking try to kill people.
Dave Smith, everybody. Dave Smith. Before I wrap up, I want to bring this briefly back to the conversation I had on Virtue Signal this week, which is a podcast about how to be a good person in this terrible world. I said something there that I will also say here, which is that watching the Louis C.K. special, a special that is heavily about aging and how horrible it is to age and how ugly and unpleasant old people are, I was reminded of that Noah Baumbach movie, the new one that came out last year, unless it was this year. I think it was last year. Anyways, Jay Kelly, which is about George Clooney as a George Clooney avatar movie star who has no friends other than the people who work for him. His kids barely know him. He's spent his entire life on set, and now he's sort of towards the end of his career, looking back at all of the choices and the sacrifices that he's made. And there's a bit near the end of the movie where he's begging his daughter to come to this film festival tribute for him. And he tells her that she has to come. His work has to have meant something. And his daughter responds, what if it didn't? And I don't know if you liked that movie, but I liked it. I thought it was a really thoughtful, interesting look at the costs of celebrity. And I was struck by that line in particular because I felt it gets to the heart of the rationalizations that we make for the artists we love, or for our own art, if we're a famous artist or even a non-famous artist. Just this idea that, yes, someone may be a terrible person, a bigot or an abuser or simply a neglectful father. And maybe they're not a terrible person, but they have just done bad things we all agree are bad. But they make great work. They've contributed something. They've made something that makes it all worth it. And I don't know if there is ever an easy answer to the question, but I think it is important for us always to be asking, is it really all worth it? Are great films worth your children not knowing you? Is a comedy career worth hurting people? Is it worth spreading hatred and conspiracism just because some people laugh and feel a very temporary pleasure? And if it all means nothing, which it might, we can't really know in our own lives, then what's left? Well, I think, you're left, the person you are and the relationships that you had. I think we owe it to each other to be good people because there isn't really anything else, I don't think. And I've said it before, but what makes me crazy about so many comedians, or at least the comedians that I write about, is that they use this art form, which is an art form that I love and that I think is very important and very powerful. They use it as an excuse to be bad people. They use it as a way of exorcising their hatred and their ignorance and their malintent. And I don't accept that. And I don't think any of us should accept it. Well, that's all I have for today. That's all I've got for episode 7 of the Humorism Evening Podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening, and please let me know what you think. End of podcast.